welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to artist Bob Nemer. We talk about how he got started in art, how he takes his art off the canvas and to other mediums, and his role in the founding of the Uptown Art Fair on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Bob Nemer, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. It's great being here.
So you are an artist, but like just in our talking for a few minutes before we started recording, and I'm sorry I didn't start recording sooner because there were some fantastic stories in there that nobody else is going to get to hear, and I'm sorry for all of you. But there's a lot more than just the art, but the art is sort of, I think, in a lot of ways what you're sort of known for, right? Am I characterizing that correctly?
Well, let's say I'm coming out of the closet when it comes to art.
Okay.
I've been an artist since I was 5 years old. And I'll tell you the story. We lived on Aurora Avenue in St. Paul. We called it the old country back then. I didn't call it, but it was known as the old country. And I went to school at Jackson Elementary School, which is across University Avenue by Minnesota Milk Company, used to be there.
Okay.
And the school was basically all black. I didn't know that at the time. I just thought I was lighter than everybody. But that was the divide, was University Avenue. On my side, it was Italians and Jews. And we lived in a home that had a coal-burning stove, or a coal-burning furnace, excuse me. And the coal man would come and dump coal down the chute into the basement so he could shovel coal into the furnace. And I would go down the basement. And I remember when I was 5, I took a piece of coal, I started drawing on the floor. And my mother came down. And I remember sitting in her apron, she's sitting on the step looking at me, and I thought, boy, I'm going to get hollered at. Instead, she looked at me and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm drawing." And she said, "Do you like it?" I said, "Yeah, I like it." She said, "Well, you need to sign it." And I didn't know what sign it meant. She grabbed my right hand. I had a piece of coal, and she drew out R-A-N. She said, "That's you, Ran. Robert Allen Nemer." And it left such an impression on me that everything I've done from that time on, I always signed R-A-N. To this day, 78 years later, I sign R-A-N. And that means I like it and I'm finished. And I have many paintings and a lot of sculpture I've done, and I've never signed because I didn't like it. So that's how I got started. And as an artist, you realize you're different. Other people don't have the same passion and liking you do. It's like an athlete. You're groomed. As an artist, you groom yourself because you kind of feel bad about saying you're an artist because people treat you different.
How so?
I think the average person thinks the stereotype of an artist dresses weird, is sloppy, is kind of out there, is very much a person who is trying to express their feeling, like a writer. A writer is an artist. A person who sings is an artist. An artist who does visual art, I always felt different. And I used to sketch on napkins and anything I could sketch on. And as I got older, I started turning the sketches into painting. Before I even got into painting, I went to University of Minnesota. I went into art education. got a Bachelor of Science in Art Education. And I got a Master of Fine Arts in printmaking. Each step, you develop a different talent and use different media. A lot of people are sculptors, they stay with it. They develop that. I was never satisfied. I kept changing. And to the point where in my mid-20s, I had a real job to support myself, because it's true, artists generally starve because they're not Picassos or Chagalls. But you study those people, and they have a passion. And I'll tell you something. Picasso, when he passed away, how many paintings do you think he had that were there in his inventory?
Oh, I'd have to imagine hundreds.
45,000.
Okay, so I undershot a little bit.
A little bit. And because an artist doesn't think about his inventory or her inventory, they just keep creating.
Mm-hmm.
And that process of creation is, everybody is a creator. But some people are destroyers too. So what I did was I looked for things to create through my ability to paint or sculpt or whatever. And if I really want to see somebody, I used to do very realistic things. Trees, people, you learn in school, still life, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And when I took sculpture at the U, the old East Bank, there was a professor, Peter Lepori. He blindfolded me, gave me a piece of clay, and with my left hand, I would feel your face. And my right hand, I'd recreate it in clay. That's how I learned.
Wow.
So when I got into art education, I had a professor who had created what they call Krylon. It was a spray fix for chalk with 3M. He became paralyzed from the neck down because it wasn't ventilated, the room. They didn't know.
Oh.
So I pushed him around campus for 3 years. He was my professor. He was my mentor. And he and I just hit it off. And I lost my dad when I was 16, so I started school at 70. They pushed me up a grade. And he became like a father figure. And he said, he used to call me Nemer. He said, Nemer, you can do whatever you want. So it was a real inspiration. So in those days, the campus was spread out on the East Bank. And the wintertime made no difference, winter or summer. I'd push him around. And I did a undergrad paper on the art of Israel. And I got a very good grade on it. So I wanted off that campus. As good as school was, I wanted to get out in the real world. So I turned it into a master's thesis. And I turned it in as a master thesis. And it was passed on, and I did my orals, and they passed on it. And nobody asked me if I had a bachelor. This is before I had my bachelor degree. So I went to my professor, and I said, I have a problem. I have a master's, but I don't have a bachelor. But I need 30 credits to graduate as a bachelor's degree. He said, how did you do that? I said, I just did it. He said, "What course have you taken?" I said, "Well, I was in a fraternity for a quarter, the first quarter when I was a freshman. And next to our house was a sorority house, all non-Jews. And there was a girl that worked in administration before computers. She used to pull the cards out of what courses to take.
Sure.
And I was dating her because I knew she worked in the admin building. And she pulled up her division courses for me. So I never took lower division. So when it came time to graduate, I decided to go to my professor and tell him I have all the upper division and I want to petition out of the 30 credits. So we went to the Board of Education. I wheeled them in and they went crazy. They said, "No way." I said, "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but you passed on a master's and I just need a bachelor's." And I showed them the paper. And they were totally frustrated with me. And they said, "Not only are you not going to get your bachelor's, we're not giving you your master's." I said, "Okay." So I wheeled my professor, Dr. Hasty, out of there. And he said, "Now what?" I said, "I have an idea." He said, "I figured you did." I said, "I want to go back in there. And I want to ask them if they don't want me to have a bachelor or a master's, I'm going to go to the Minnesota Daily, which is a newspaper,
Sure.
and tell them my expose, my story." And we went back in, and I said, I have no choice. And I said, "I'm going to go to Minnesota Daily." And they huddled up and they came back and said, "All right, but you can't go through the ceremony." I said, "That's fine. I didn't have the money to get the cap, rent the cap and gown anyway." So I got my 2 degrees, and this was during Vietnam War. And they burned down the admin building, the files, before I got my paperwork. And everything was on microfiche back then. So the only thing I had kept were my fee statements because I'm a collector. And I kept them because, to me, I wanted to use them eventually to do some kind of artwork with them.
Okay.
And with those, I finally got my 2 degrees. The degrees weren't that important, but education is important in the respect that if you're going to do anything in life today, you have to do it with information. That's the key.
Yeah.
And as an artist, I try to create paintings now through abstract, through my impression of what is happening. For example, as I say, I've had an interesting life. I came out of telecommunication before the internet. I worked for a company, and those of you who remember, called MCI. They broke up AT&T.
Yep.
I was in the fashion business prior to that time. And they read my resume. And I had worked with a lot of people in the fashion business. And they decided that I would be a good choice to come in and help them work on a project. So I signed a non-disclosure. They sent me to Western Virginia with a bunch of techs, guys that talked the techie language, with the pocket protectors and the pens in the pocket. And I said, "Why am I here?" They said, "Well, we have a network that was disconnected, a military network. It was given to our company to connect 5 universities so they could share information." And I said, "Wow." And they connected 2 universities, Yale and Stanford. And what happened was kids were trying to buy and sell on this network. And they brought me in to see if there was a commercial value because of my retail background I had come out of. And so they took Southdale Shopping Center. They sent me there with a cartoonist because there was no digitization, so everything was drawn out. And I made a little video.
Okay.
The video was basically showing an avatar face on a stick figure going into a store, turning on a hanger a piece of merchandise and going up the counter and checking out. And I did a video, brought it to major department stores, basically was told, you don't understand our business model. The business model is real simple. We build buildings for millions of dollars. We put merchandise in those buildings for multi-millions.
Right.
And we spend multi-millions to get people to come in and buy the merchandise. And you're telling me they're going to be buying on a computer? No way. We'll never be on it. Well, that was back in 1982. This is now 2023. And most of those stores are out of business. As you know, the climate has changed.
Oh, yeah.
So now technology has taken over the world. So we got cell phones, we're on the internet, and I use the technology quite differently. Because I'm a visual artist, I turn my paintings into pillows, scarves, dinnerware. I call it functional art. I want you not just hang my paintings on the wall. I want you to live with it as part of your life, like I've done.
So, at what point did you decide that you wanted your art to become more functional? That you wanted to not just paint, have canvas hanging up around
Right.
the house? That you wanted it to be, and if you go to your website, it's ranarts.net. You can see that it's on scarves, it's on
Right.
dinnerware. When did that sort of shift take place for you, and how easy was it to find somebody to take your work and put it on those products?
Sure. Good question. It happened over time. When I saw the development of the internet, I was a very realistic artist prior to that time. I would draw typical, trees, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And with the ability to use a cell phone and take a picture, it's a picture is far better than what I could paint. So what I did was I moved from realism to abstraction.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, the printing industry, which has really changed, newspapers are kind of a thing of the past. Everything has gone digital. And there's a printing process that started to come out about 10 years ago. I could not do what I do today 10 years ago. It's called sublimation printing.
Okay.
I can take a picture of you as a JPEG on my cell phone. I can send it to a printer who can take that picture, print it on paper, and transfer that paper print to fabric and canvas
Mm-hmm.
and porcelain and anything. As a matter of fact, they used to paint all the trucks we see on the road. They're not painted anymore. Those are basically decals. They're
Right.
sublimated printing.
Okay.
That's why they're so realistic. The FedEx trucks, it's all done right here in Minnesota. The print, the vinyl print, to put FedEx on the side of the trucks.
I didn't realize it was done here. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's done here. So in Minnesota, those of you who lived here, one of the biggest industries is the printing industry because of 3M,
Mm-hmm.
the little sandpaper company that all of a sudden became a multi-process company.
I think of them as the Post-it note company, but
Yeah,
sure.
Post-it note. But they developed the printmaker plate for artists. They developed a lot of the inks, and their printing process really pushed this whole industry. And sublimation printing is a digital form of printing that became industry standard now. The old guys that used to print on a printing press, that's gone. Most people don't even use a business card anymore. They give you their email address, etc.
Right.
So as technology changed, my art had to change.
Mm-hmm.
In order for me to reach more people, we used to do galleries. Minneapolis had a lot of galleries on First Avenue, and they had a lot of galleries on Hennepin on the second level, and those galleries are gone. Some people love to go to galleries. They still have a few around.
Yeah.
But the galleries are nothing more than a room of rented wall space. And most of them make their money on the gift shop.
Sure.
And in the gift shop are artistic items. And so I don't really do galleries per se. For two reasons. One is I'd rather do a one-man show where you're looking at my work and I can now put QR codes on everything, and you can take a QR code and read about a particular painting, even a video of that, of me, why I did what I did. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I can make prints of that painting, and you can buy it as a print, you can buy it as a cup, you can buy it as a scarf.
Right.
So it allows you to really live and become a collector of a particular artist. So,
but I get all that, it all makes sense, but does a 3 foot by 5 foot canvas, how does that recreate on a coffee mug or a 12 by 12 pillow? Is it gonna have the same kind of effect if you don't see it in like the original size as you had intended, or are you okay with that?
Well, let me give you an example.
Please.
There's a pixelation program. You're talking pixels. You're talking about how well will it be recreated. I can take a painting that's 16 inches by 20 inches, and I can blow that up as big as a wall. And using a pixelation program, I can add pixels to it, so when it's printed, it'll actually be as good, in some cases better than the original painting.
Okay.
I have a painting I did in 1995 called The Burning Bush. It's probably one of my favorite paintings. It was 4 feet by 8 feet.
It's a big painting.
A big painting. I did it in 48 hours. What happened, I went to see a play called The Burning Bush. And I was it so inspired me. I went home and I had a huge canvas. I always have a blank canvas. This was a big one. I stretched myself. I started painting. I couldn't stop. I fell asleep and I woke up. I looked up at this canvas. I don't remember doing it. It was just like it happened. And I showed it to a couple of my artist friends, and they loved it. And I don't use traditional brushes. I use whatever. I've used sponges, I've used knives, forks, spoons, you name it, to create. And I showed it to a gentleman who bought it. And I have tried to buy the painting back, he won't sell it. But when I do a painting, I've always done 3 things. One is, I have the rights to recreate. You don't. I have you sign a paper.
Okay.
The second thing is, give me a color that you like, I'll include it. It used to be people wanting a painting to match their furniture and so on and so forth. Not so much anymore. And the third thing is, I'll send you now a JPEG as I progress the painting. So you get a look at where it started and where it ended. And if we're going to do a commission piece.
Okay.
And don't call me, I'll contact you when it's done. So with those in mind, it gives me the freedom to really express and to do something quite different. So like I say, most of the paintings I do now, because of just space, are roughly 16 by 20. But I've blown them up as big as 4 by 8 feet. I have one on my wall. I have a friend who has one on her wall. And I did pillows and scarves with that same painting.
That's very cool.
And I paint what I believe, what I'm passionate about. I lived in Oklahoma City when the Murrah building was blown up.
Oh, wow.
I was there for 1 year. And very interesting experience. This was I call Bashert. For those of you who understand Yiddish,
Sure.
it was meant to be. While I was there, July 9th, I moved there. And in the morning of, I forget what date it was, but it was at 9, and in the morning, the building was blown up and the earth shook. I lived 3 miles from there. I had been in that building a week before to get a driver's license for Oklahoma. And in that building, it was very small. There was a nursery, and it was a federal building, the Murrah Federal Building. And I turned on TV, and I see this disaster. And I went down there about a month after. They had torn the building down, put the fence up, and it was a court, very eerie. 2 buildings that were in this court, the windows were blown out, and the shadow of the remainder of the building was there, fenced in. And I sat there and I looked down the end of the court. There was a tree that hadn't lost a leaf. Full moon. And I went home and I created a painting called Cityscape, 3 feet by 6 feet. I still have the original painting. And I lived in an apartment building, a brick building, and there was a matching building next door. There were two gals that lived there, and we used to drink at night. And I'd paint, and we'd talk, and they saw this painting. They saw me develop a painting. And July 9th, I packed my car up, took the painting back to Minneapolis, and I came home. And I got a call from one of the gals, said, "Where are you?" I said, "Well, I left. I went back to Minneapolis. I'm home." She said, "You know what happened out here last night?" I said, "I have no idea." "Your building's gone. Got hit by a tornado." I would have been dead had I stayed 1 more day.
Whoa.
That's Bashert.
Yeah, it is.
So, that painting to me is very near and dear because it's very meaningful. The burning bush is very meaningful. I take trips, I call them Bob's Big Adventure, like Pee-wee. Except my trips are different. I get in the car, I used to get in with an atlas, now I just get in with a thought. And I don't know where I'm going, I don't know if I'm coming home. I just go. It could be a week, could be a month, could be a year. I went away for a year. I took a trip during the pandemic. I wanted to find out what the country was feeling. I went from Minneapolis to Omaha. I walked into a restaurant. There was a couple sitting there. We were masked. And I said to her, "Why are you crying?" And she said she had just lost a relative. They'd lost their home. 2 kids were sitting there. To me, they were kids. They were college students on their computer. They said, "We can't go to school, so we're doing it virtually." They hated it. So I left there. I'm sitting in my car in the parking lot. And I said, "Boy, where am I going?" I I have a supplement company. I try to make people healthy on top of everything else. And I ended up driving to Laverton, Utah. Laverton, Utah is a very southwest corner of Utah. And that's where our lab is. And from Laverton, Utah, is Zion National Park, is 25 miles. I end up at Zion National Park. Very spiritual place for me.
Gorgeous park.
Very gorgeous.
Yes.
And I had a real experience there, which would take too long to tell, but if anybody wants to know, they can contact me up here. The other thing I do, I used to do a lot of sketching. Now I write blogs. And so every day I try to sit down and write a blog. And that's like a sketch to me. It's a past sketch I turn into a painting. A past memory I turn into a painting. Or when I'm thinking about a particular word like motivation or trust and what those words mean to me, and I turn those into paintings. I just did a painting called Faith, a visual picture of the word faith. So I try to combine it. Mm-hmm. And as an artist, again, your thought process is different. It just is. Right. I can't help it. When I look at a chair, I don't see a chair. I see a shadow and how the light hits that chair, that shape. So shape and color to me is important. I'm looking right now at a white shape. It's a chair. Everybody says it's a chair. To me, it's a shape. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a pear. It's like a pear shape. And the color is white, but when the light hits it, if you look behind that shape, it casts a shadow. That is a different shape. So it's looking at an object or life for what it is. We think it's realism. It's not. Our life is shape and colors. Used to be when I grew up, summertime you wore white.
Okay.
Light colors.
Yeah, light, yeah.
Now you wear any color you want. Doesn't make any difference. And you wore white socks with shorts, not black socks. So fashion has changed. Our lives have changed. Our thought process is different. As an artist, you try to create that feeling. And so when somebody looks at my paintings, I kind of set them up chronologically. The year that they were done and why I did what I did.
Okay.
I think it's important for people to understand. It's like when you read a book. The artist that writes the book, the writer, is giving you his or her thought or feeling about a particular subject within information in their mindset that has come from something they're passionate about. And you read it, and they hope that you like what they wrote. So you want to buy more books.
But the reader's interpretation of the book, much like the regular, the person who sees your painting, their interpretation and their takeaway may be different. Like once you put it out in the world, that's nothing you can control anymore.
Totally.
Is that hard to give up that control?
Not at all.
Oh, great.
No, I love it. I'll give you an example. I used to do a lot of galleries, and the artist would put a price on a painting. Mm-hmm. And somebody come by and say, I like that painting, but can I get it for $100 less? And the artist, yeah, sure, boom. Well, I stood in the corner. I never reproached people. I watched it see like bees land on a piece of work I had hanging there. I remember one time a woman was standing there looking at it. And I went up to her and I said, you like that? She said, yeah, I do. I said, why? Well, I like the colors and the shape. It talks to me. I said, what's it saying? It's saying, I like to own you. I'd like you to own me. But she said, I can't afford it. I said, you can't. So I took the painting off the wall and I handed it to her. I said, it's yours. She said, what do you mean? I said, I want to share it with you. I want you to feel that emotion every time you look at it. I'm creating a different emotion. I'm giving you something.
That's very lovely.
Well, that got me into trouble. The other artist said, that's it. You're not showing in the gallery anymore. We're here to make money. You're here to give things away. And of course, the gallery said, hey, we're here to make a commission off what you sell. So I got banned from the galleries.
So one thing that got to touch on now, because
yes.
It's coming up August 4th to 6th is the Uptown Art Fair.
Oh,
and
yes.
You told me you're unsure if you're going to be displaying there, but the Uptown Art Fair exists in part because you helped create it.
That's correct.
How and why did that come about?
In 1964, when I was at the U in art education, the Merchants Association on Lake and Hennepin came to the school and said, we'd like to have some artists come over and display some of their works. And the thought was they were trying to draw people as an event to that area.
Sure.
It was not a fundraiser. It was to draw people to the area. On the corner of Lake and Hennepin was Calhoun Square. The building itself was a Snyder drugstore, and the basement was a bowling alley. 5 of us from the U, all students, went over, and we had to bring 5 pieces of artwork. It could be a painting, it could be a sculpture, it had to be something that we were willing to donate 1 piece so they could auction it off on Sunday evening. So we could not put our items anywhere other than line the curb and put them against the building. And so people came and they looked at some of the work, they drew some people, they advertised it, and they advertised the fact they were going to have a drawing and auction off these paintings and these art pieces on Sunday evening. Guy stood on a soapbox, middle of Lake and Hennepin, auctioned them 5 pieces of artwork off. That was the beginning in 1964. So next year will be the 60th year. In 2002, I decided I was going to show in the Uptown Art Fair again. You had to be juried, which means they've got a bunch of judges that decide if they're going to let you show or not. And on the form, it said, have you ever been in the Uptown Art Fair? And I put down on there, I started it. And they freaked out. So the next thing I know, they're interviewing me. They put me on channel 4, 5, and 11. The Minneapolis Star and Trib came out, wrote up and did a picture story on me, which I still have. And in their book they put out, their booklet, they had my picture and the story. And they said, 38 years ago, he was part of the star of the Uptown Art Fair, and a really nice little write-up. So that's how it started.
That's one way to make sure that the jury lets you in, is to say you started it. How do you keep me out?
Right. So I've been talking to now here's how the area has changed. We all know what happened on 38th in Chicago,
Sure.
And what's happened in the Uptown area. It's gone through massive changes.
It has.
It's somewhat considered to be a little more dangerous now than before. They used to get 350,000 people. They're hoping to get that kind of turnout this year. Obviously, they'll have a lot of security. I've been talking to the 2 women who run the Uptown Art Fair. They have a good showing of artists coming back. It's become crafts and art, as we all know. But here's what's interesting about the Uptown Art Fair. Just for fun, I did the St. Paul Art Crawl 2 weeks ago on Payne Avenue in a little gallery. And I did it for one reason only. I wanted to see how St. Paul and Minneapolis has integrated through the years. Because that river is like a wall. It's always been.
Yeah.
And as people came in, and this is over by Ham's Brewery, the street lights were used to be gas lit. They're the original street lights. Now they're electric, thank God. And as I'm sitting there and people are coming in, and I had 10 pieces hanging up, and I had QR codes. I wanted to see if they used QR codes, which they did, all ages. But I asked people, young and old, have you ever been to the Uptown Art Fair? And many of them said, what's that? I said, are you from here? Oh, yeah, I've lived here all my life. These are people 45, 50 years old. Lake and Hennepin, does that sound familiar? Not really. Do you go to Minneapolis at all? Not too much. So it's still the same.
Yeah.
All these years later.
The more things change,
the more they stay the same, yeah.
Absolutely.
But I hope to either next year, I will probably get a booth because it's 60 years.
I feel like the milestone years, you have to.
Right.
It wouldn't seem right if you weren't there.
I'm hoping to be there. As I say, I'm talking to 2 gals. And the gentleman who built Calhoun Square is still living. He's 94, living downtown Minneapolis. I've been in touch with him. His last name is Harris.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that he and I have a booth together.
That would be neat.
I think so.
That would be neat. Well, Bob, this has been a fascinating trip through your story, but before we let you go, last couple of questions. First, what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Wow. I would have to say Purim is one, because I love cooking.
Okay.
I'm a hamantash maker.
All right.
And, of course, I make challah and matzo ball soup, you name it. So.
What's your favorite hamantash filling?
Oh, boy. I'm an apricot and prune guy.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And what is your favorite Jewish food? You listed a few, but what is, you don't have to make it. Like, it could be one you go buy somewhere. But
I like a Reuben.
Oh.
Turkey Reuben or Rachel.
Yeah, sure.
I love that. Cecil's, to me, I went to St. Paul Central, so.
Okay.
I've been going to Cecil's since I was a kid, and I still go there. Great food.
Still great food. Bob Nemer, we will have the link to your website where people can take a look more at your art and learn more about you and your work. But thank you so much for joining me. This was a delight to connect and to talk to you here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.